Welcome to this 30-minute presentation on eco-spiritual social work by 4 colleagues speaking from and about the about social work theory and practice, teaching and learning.
So to start, I'd like to acknowledge that we are all coming from across Turtle Island, and we are all settlers coming from various locations. So we'd like to recognize the many beautiful lands that we are honored to live on. Myself, as well as Dr. Cassandra Hanrahan, are coming from Chibuktuk Mi'kma'ki, which is colonially known as Halifax, Nova Scotia. And this is the unceded and unsurrendered lands of the Mi'kmaq Omu peoples.
And Eric is coming from North Bay, Ontario, from the traditional Anishinaabe territory, home of the Nipissing and the Dokis First Nation. And I, Dr. Indrani Margolin, is coming from Vancouver, British Columbia, on the traditional ancestral and unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam First Nations.
Hi, so I'm Dr. Cassandra Hanrahan. I'm an associate professor in the School of Social Work at Dalhousie University. Nice to be here.
I'm Dr. Indrani Margolin, associate professor of social work from the University of Northern British Columbia. Welcome.
Hello, and I'm Eric Crowther, registered social worker in Northeastern Ontario.
Hi, I'm Dani Sherwood, and I'm a Master of Social Work student at Dalhousie University. Great to be here.
So we're going to start with a breath meditation. The breath is the essence of our life. Nothing unites us more than the shared biological, neurological, and spiritual imperative for the breath and all the vital elements it contains. Attuning to it recenters, revitalizes, and harmonizes us in the in-breathing and out-breathing in which all organisms live, move, and have their being. This word, breath, actually is completely related to the word spirit, which comes from the Latin spiritus, which means I breathe, or spiral, which means spiral. All life, including the human body, grows in spiral. Even the breath enters our body and leaves the body in vortices. So let us together meditate for a few minutes on our essence. So I invite you to just step away a little bit from your computer so you have a little bit of space around you. I invite you to give some attention to your feet and have your feet planted flat on the floor. I invite you to pay attention to your shoulders above your hips so that your spine can be aligned even if you're leaning. And I invite you to bring your forefinger and your thumb in a loop together to create a loop like this. And just gently close your eyes and look between your eyebrows, or with your eyes open, softly focus in front of you. And I invite you to attend to your breath without trying to control or change your breath. Just follow your breath in through your nostrils, down your spine, filling your belly like a balloon. And follow the breath in your own time, up the spine, through the mind, out your nostrils, into the atmosphere. And follow your breath in through the nostrils, down the spine, filling the body and the belly with rejuvenation and all that you need to refocus and recenter yourself. And follow the breath up the spine, through the mind, out your nostrils, into the atmosphere, expanding across the sky, feeling your big me. And follow the breath in through the nostrils, filling your belly like a balloon. You may imagine hitting the back of your belly button, feeling your little me, and follow the breath up the spine, through the mind, out into the atmosphere, feeling yourself merge and connect with everything. And I invite you to keep your eyes closed and wiggle your fingers and your toes. Grab onto the seat that you're on. Just bring your attention back and very gently, very slowly open your eyelids. Come back to our presentation.
Thank you, Indrani. We're going to move now from that place and moment of being connected within ourselves and without to a very brief discussion about person in the environment, and its limitations. Pi, as it's known, is generally the mainstream approach to thinking about and doing social work. Social work sought to distinguish itself from other helping professions, bolstering itself as a profession while developing alongside medicine by claiming the transaction between person and environment as its particular domain. The Pi System project was undertaken in the 1950s and has since grown and developed, and much has been written about it. But essentially, it was developed to provide social workers with a kind of standardized tool needed to clarify the domain of social work problems and to define social work, in other words, and to address, in particular, the dual construct, which divided social workers at the time of its early development. The two groups being those who were person-focused, thinking about people's psyches and behaviors, and those who were more environment-focused, thinking about environmental conditions. The person in environment model has essentially remained unchallenged for the better part of 70 years. It highlights the importance of understanding an individual and their behavior through their environment. A person's environment, along with their experiences, will help shape the way that they view the world and how they think and why they respond the way they do. In social work, gathering information from clients, for instance, is a foundation piece of the work that we do. And knowing what information to seek and how to organize it is like gathering pieces of a puzzle in a way, and then working to put them together in a whole picture. However, while the Pi approach involves the concept that people can be heavily influenced by their environments, and social work speaks the language of exchange, or the exchange language of environment, all too often in reality, the focus has mainly been clinical, and that is to say on individual behavior, with the environment exclusively denoting the social dimension of human existence, or people's social relations, social networks. So rarely has it meant through modern social work, natural spaces. We'll move to the next slide. So as a systems approach, Pi, person and environment, is a type of ecological social work that is fundamentally anthropocentric. And while there is much to say on this concept, we want to introduce it here because, well, I think in a moment its pivotal dimension will become clearer. But essentially, humanism, it has been the foundational basis of the profession, and it's taken as the focus of humanism is the human being as the measure of all things, as the center of the universe. And ironically, though, what with this tremendous focus on, person focused, although we know historically that has meant an ideal person, but people have been measured against an ideal person, which typically has been white, affluent, heterosexual, male, and so on. But ironically, this focus of humanism has severely limits the profession's capacity to engage critically with the structural and global barriers and constraints marginalizing and oppressing different disenfranchised groups. But it also limits the profession to engage with the resilience and the power of the more than human world that animates and sustains so many. Also, from a much broader environmental or more than human perspective, mainstream social work prevents holistic, relational, and creative responses to the major critical issues that we face today, like deteriorating natural environments, climate crisis, species extinctions, and of course, the ever increasing emergence and reemergence of deadly zoonotic diseases. We're going to just move in the next slide to look at what we mean by a ecosocial lens. So Dani will have a few things to say there.
Yes, so ecosocial work, or the ecosocial lens, there's also various terms on this: environmental social work, ecological social work. But we wanted to share this particular definition of an ecosocial lens, which was originally written by Rambari, Powers, and Smith in 2019 in their paper Ecosocial Work and Social Change in Community Practice. So I'll just go ahead and share this. The ecosocial lens recognizes the interconnectedness of all life in our ecosystem, and thus the fair and sustainable use of resources to promote these relationships and the well-being of all. And so when we say well-being of all, this of course includes not just humans, but also animals, plants, and even the cosmos, right? Everything that is a part of this universe, essentially. This lens requires us to critically examine and question modern societal structures, values, beliefs, practices, and ways of life that lead to social and ecological injustices through overconsumerism, materialism, anthropocentrism, oppression, and exploitation of people and the planet. And so we were just speaking to the problem of anthropocentrism and oppression and all of these pieces. So we really resonated with this particular definition.
Mm-hmm. So, excuse me. So our understanding then that we have come to for this presentation on EcoSpiritual, or using an EcoSpiritual lens, really combines in a way a post-anthropocentric perspective and then an expanded scope of practice that extends the conventional biopsychosocial approach to practice, integrating spiritual dimensions. So as noted from the definition that Dani referred us to, the ecosocial lens recognizes the interconnectedness of life in a universal or global ecosystem. And thus then it leads, one would hope, to a fair and sustainable use of resources to promote these relationships and the well-being of all. With that being said, though, we recognize that there is much debate around some of the terms and concepts of ecosocial work, but in general, we do concur with a general consensus that environmental justice as a concept, as a phrase, is more anthropocentric as it focuses on the impact of human populations and disparities that are created as a result of climate change, environmental degradation, and policies related to environmental management, for example, disaster recovery, fishing policies, and so on. Ecological justice, on the other hand, articulates a broader ecosocial vision of justice for the ecosystem as a whole, with the understanding that humans are only one part of this ecosystem. In other words, we are part of a web of life. And that if this ecosystem were to collapse, humans may not survive. We couple this understanding, our understanding then of ecosocial work with an expanded biopsychosocial spiritual lens. And this integrates, it's a more integrated scope of practice. It recognizes that persons see themselves generally, even if one can't articulate it, people tend to experience themselves as a complex constellation of qualities with many dimensions, some known, some not known, much more varied than the ideal humanist man. So Pi and other humanist theories of practice that take human privilege, for example, for granted, usually emphasize the two, just the two, and sometimes three, the first three dimensions of the biopsychosocial approach. Quite often, even in more conservative environments, the social is left off. And we see this happen regularly with traditional assessment practices, especially among psychiatrists who work with the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, and also among physicians who work with the International Classification of Diseases manuals, where little to no credence is given to the latter two dimensions of the biopsychosocial spiritual approach. And yet the irony or the sadness for us is that it is the social and the spiritual dimensions that or where the substance of a person's lives is often played out. This is where meaning is often constructed and relationships develop. So as we continue our conversation with this presentation, we have two guiding questions, and Dani, if you can move forward, that we'd like you to keep in mind as we present some of our ideas to you. The first is, so how can an eco-spiritual social work guide a more integrative approach to the divisive issues that we face in our time by highlighting a nexus of spiritual and nature, or spiritual and environment in social work, two areas that historically have been left out. The other question that we'd like you to contemplate is, how can social workers motivate social and cultural arrangements and relations that help others to establish shared common ground beyond difference? Next slide.
So I'm going to speak to our guiding principles. And so these are the guiding principles that we chose were most in alignment with our presentation of those that are part of the overall summit. And so those are, in this case, diversity, reciprocity, and equity. So when we say diversity, we are speaking to recognizing, respecting, and valuing all of our differences. So whether that be our differences amongst humans, right? Or whether that be, within or between groups, or even our differences as humans and the more than human world, right? And the differences that exist between all the various species and aspects of our global environment and the web of life, all our relations. And so I kind of think about like biodiversity in a sense, and how important that is to have that diversity for us to grow and thrive and to reach our fullest potential. And so I'm kind of going to speak to this a little out of order, but they're all interconnected really. I feel this brings us to equity, where equity speaks to how important it is that we create conditions in society, especially as social workers who are very much concerned with societal structures, in which everyone is able to participate and be included. And so, that's going to look different for each person, depending on where we're at and the supports we need. And not only people, right, but also the animals and the environment. How can we ensure that our environment is thriving and reaching its fullest potential as well, and that we are including all of these aspects of life in the work that we do. And so, yeah, it's really important that we consider that we are always considering the whole and not just humans, because we are very much a part of Mother Earth and everything around us. We are not separate from that. And so this brings us to reciprocity, and which speaks to the importance of our relations and the interconnectedness and the interdependence that we share with everything around us. So from human to human, but also human to, water, our resources, the trees, animals, two-legged, four-legged. How are we ensuring that we are acting towards our respecting and acting on our responsibilities that we have to our global community and every part of that community, right? And so I just wanted to bring attention to a beautiful article that's written by Glenn Coulthard and Leanne Simpson called Grounded Normativity and Place-Based Solidarity. It really speaks to this, all of these concepts, and especially the reciprocity piece. And you can find that in our reference list.
I'm going to focus on the spiritual aspect of the lens we're putting forward. So a spiritual worldview of unity is what we're talking about beneath diversity, of oneness that lays beneath this beautiful, diverse world of ours. So we don't speak to unity to erase diversity, but rather to deeply understand it and understand its foundation. All life, including the human body, if we think about how it grows, it starts with a single cell that duplicates itself and divides. And then this process is called mitosis. And then there's two cells that exist containing all the exact same identical DNA, chromosomes. And so when we think about diversity, you think about it from these two cells. What was the origin of the two cells? The one original cell that started as one and divided itself and became two. When we meditate, because we're going to do some meditation, we tune into this original oneness before division that gave rise to diversity. So from a unity perspective, consciousness, both the cosmic consciousness and individualized consciousness, is the creative force of this world. It's consciousness inspired and motivated to grow. When you think about it, from plants inspired to grow, toward light, toward water. And all of life works this way. We are inspired to grow toward, because we have an inner tendency to evolve. All life has that tendency. That's the humanistic perspective. So matter and spirituality, biology and spirituality are not in conflict with each other. They are two ends of the same strand. There's a beautiful sloka from an ancient Vedantic text that I want to recite from you from the Isha Upanishad, because unity, we can speak toward it, but we can't speak it. Unity has to be felt. So I'm going to sing this sloka for you because music allows us to feel. And here it is. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidang Purnato Purnamudachayate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamavavashishayate Om. The meaning of this is infinite, that is infinite. Out of this infinite comes that infinite, and this infinite remains infinite. This is the kind of oneness and unity we're talking about beneath the beautiful diversity.
Thank you, Indrani. That was beautiful. The song gave me goosebumps. So I want to share, sharing a little bit about student perspective on these issues, more focused on how I came to this place of learning and my journey, just a little snapshot of that. So hoping to sort of speak to folks who are also on that learning student journey as well. So I am in a 2-year Master of Social Work program because my undergrad is in psychology. And so I've actually only been studying social work specifically for 2 years. And it all started for me, really, I suppose, with one of the classes I took, which at the time was an elective. I'm happy to say that now it is going to be a mandatory course on Aboriginal perspective of social work practice and delivery, which really focused on, well, of course, the land. Indigenous people, by definition, are from the land. And so it really opened my eyes to social work and our responsibility to honor and nourish and respect the land and the people of the land. And so from there, I also had a couple other classes where there was one article on eco-anxiety, and then another article on environmental racism. And one of the first films actually in my degree was There's Something in the Water, with Elliot Page and Ingrid Waldron. And so really beautiful film, highly would recommend watching this. But this is all to say that these little pieces came together to make me realize that there is a whole wealth of literature and knowledge and wisdom that focuses on social work's responsibility to the land and our role to respond to climate change, especially given how climate change exacerbates so many pre-existing social inequalities, and also social work's responsibility to all of life and not just humans. And so that is very much missing in the mainstream curriculum at this time, but hopefully there will be some shifts. So what I did was I sort of took some initiative in deepening this learning journey through an independent study that I chose to focus, where I focused on ecosocial work and social work's role in response to climate change. And I really tried to center this through the 7 sacred Anishinaabe grandfather teachings as my sort of learning principles, and with a focus on Indigenous perspectives. And now I am hoping to create a thesis that is focused again on that intersection. And I also I had the privilege of organizing a panel discussion through the Diversity and Equity Committee of the school that I'm a part of, Dalhousie School of Social Work. And I was able to invite some incredible panelists to speak there. And so that's really how I've been able to continue learning and really expanding my learning on these topics. And I hope that that can inspire other students to find those avenues that are available to them to deepen their own learning journey on whatever it is they're passionate about. Over to you, Eric.
You're muted, Eric. We can't hear you, Eric.
Thank you. Let me redo that. I had myself on mute. Thank you, Cassandra. Thank you, Indrani, and thank you, Dani, for your wonderful meditations and presentations. Dani, I would have so loved to have been introduced to the kind of material that you're currently being introduced to in your master's program. And hello, everyone, and it's good to be with you today. I'm speaking from the personal perspective of a clinician. And almost 20 years ago now, John Coates, the former chair of the Department of Social Work at St. Thomas University in Fredericton, New Brunswick, opened his groundbreaking book, Ecology and Social Work Toward a New Paradigm, by stating that deep concern and anxiety about the present state of our world and its future is felt by people across the breadth of this planet. The Earth is in crisis. Now, as a registered social worker working in the area of children's mental health, the crisis hit home with me in the spring of 2020, the advent of COVID-19 in my province. Following Coates, I was forced to realize that my actions must change, must be transformed, and that it would be vital to reconceptualize social work's role in order to link social justice with environmental justice. Can I have the next slide, please? The effects on me and my fellow social workers and our clients has been profound. Before the pandemic, up to 28,000 children and youth in Ontario were waiting as long as 2.5 years for service. In a very recent Children's Mental Health of Ontario study found that 70% of children in Ontario are experiencing a deterioration in mental health. And nearly 2/3 of all youth report a worsening of their mental health. At the same time, 83% of CMHO member agencies are reporting that they're having a staffing shortage. Next slide, please. While the agency I'm working for, along with many, many others, pivoted extremely quickly to offer virtual services, our health guidelines stressed the importance of social distancing to help contain the virus and its variants. Social distancing has meant a lack of connection, a fundamental human need. We've all had the sense of losing control and a loss of agency. And not everyone in our province agrees with health guidelines. Conflict has resulted at all levels of our society. The issues have been compounded by misinformation, disturbing pandemic predictions and possibilities, and unresolved tensions. Will our vaccines continue to hold up? Why should we have to get vaccines? Will our schools have to be closed again? How dare they even consider closing schools? When can we see our clients in person again? Why should we have to get vaccinated? Why do I have to wear a mask at work when I don't wear one in the community? With so many colleagues leaving and with our waiting list growing, how can I continue to meet workplace demands and pressures and keep my life balanced? It's exhausting. So how can we help each other with our own sense of loss, thank you, and anxiety? Fortunately, as clinicians, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We developed evidence-based interventions for anxiety a generation ago. We developed adventure-based wilderness therapy approaches long ago, where we helped children and youth build relationship and communication skills in a natural setting. And we can continue to incorporate and to understand and integrate the practice of nature into social work itself. For instance, a prescription for nature, an initiative of BC Parks Foundation, is now coming to Ontario. The organization is driven by healthcare professionals who want to improve their clients' health by connecting them to nature. As they say, our goal is to make prescribing time in nature simple, fun, and effective. Indeed, there is hope. But I'd like you to leave you with one question. Having been confronted with the reality that we need to change, how do we, as clinical social workers, help manage both our loss of agency and our clients' loss of agency in order to build capacity and transform ourselves indeed, and society, so that there is a better quality of life for all on Earth? Thank you.
So finally, I would like to leave us, like exactly like Eric was saying, on a note of hope. And so just very briefly reflecting on this time that we are living in with the global pandemic ongoing, what we saw was initially, especially with all of the lockdowns, is really forced a lot of people to slow down and realize what was really important in their lives, and to also realize what wasn't working in society, especially on a global level. And so I think it brought a lot of awareness to folks and brought perspective to what is really happening right now. We also saw that there was a drastic reduction in emissions, which unfortunately wasn't enough to really make a dent in any of the greater issues happening with that. But we did see smog clearing, we saw water clearing, but at the same time, the isolation removed human interaction from the wilderness and wildlife, which is actually very important for the well-being of wildlife in some respects, especially when we think about reciprocity, right? And so again, I think that this really showed the significance of everything that we're speaking to. It was very much highlighted by this isolation and lockdown period. And now we are in this unprecedented time where we do have a unique opportunity to change societal structures. And so what does it mean when I say critical hope? I'd like to use it I'd like to use a definition here. And so this is by Zambilas in 2014. To say that someone is critically hopeful means that the person is involved in a critical analysis of power relations and how they constitute one's emotional ways of being in the world, while attempting to construct imaginatively and materially a different life world. And so I think that we are absolutely presented with an opportunity for critical hope at this time. Thank you.
So we're going to leave you on a hopeful note with a meditation. Ancient chants or mantras have been given to spiritual aspirants or learners to tune into spirit throughout history, throughout cultures. They have been extraordinarily well developed in the Vedantic or Vedic system of India. And we're going to focus on the Sanskrit chant called Tat Tavam Ashi, which in Sanskrit means everyone is one, everything is consciousness. This is a second proclamation out of Master Teacher Tolshi Sen's work of 4 proclamations. But this proclamation aligns really well with tuning in to our connection with the natural world, Mother Earth, the cosmos. Everything we see, touch, hear, taste, and smell not only has consciousness, is consciousness. It is alive. That is why Chief Seattle's speech to President Abraham Lincoln is it's an incredible elucidation of this concept that everything is one. He spoke about the river, the trees, the animals as brothers and sisters. Unity cannot be explained in words. It can only be felt. So when we meditate on this Vedic chant, Tat Tavam Ashi, you feel your unity. And when you feel it, you realize it. We know realization comes out of feeling, and we understand it as our true source of power that we all share and is available to all of us as one family. So I'm going to guide you for a few minutes in this meditation now. And I invite you again to put some distance between you and the computer so you have some space around your body to relax. And I'm hoping this technology comes through well. Can that music be heard? Okay, so I invite you to gently close your eyes or softly gaze on a wall before you and follow my voice. I invite you to, like a call and answer, I'll say Tat Tavam Ashi, and I invite you to respond back to me. The easiest way to do this. There's no right or wrong. Just feel the music and hear the sound of my voice and your voice, and be with the experience without any critical self-judgment. Tat Tavam Ashi. Tat Tavam Ashi. Everything is consciousness. Tat Tavam Ashi. Tat Tavam Ashi. Everything is consciousness. Tat Tavam Ashi. Tat Tavam Ashi. Tat Tavam Ashi. Tat Tattavam Ashi. 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 Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Invite you to keep your eyelids closed and just breathe in and feel any sensations or feelings that you have. Take note. Keeping that feeling inside you. Gently wiggle your fingers and your toes. Take hold of the seat that you're sitting on. And gently open your eyelids and come back to our presentation. Thank you for sharing in that meditation with us. We hope you enjoyed it. And we thank you for listening to us in this presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to email any of us. Here is each of our contacts. If anyone is interested in further accessing this music, you can go to Ancient Secrets Path. And we have fully enjoyed speaking with you today about eco-spiritual social work. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.